The sacred is revealed in the ordinary. There is a beauty in this. But how do we discover the mystery of the sacred in our seemingly mundane existence? Welcome to Revealed, a podcast sponsored by Resurrection Catholic Parish in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Let's join our hosts, Katie McAllister and Tony Pickler, as they explore the lives of people, organizations, and resources that will help us delve into the sacredness of the ordinary.
Welcome to another episode of Revealed, where we are searching for the sacredness in ordinary life. In this episode, we are going to be breaking open a prayer practice, and the prayer practice for this episode is contemplation. So, Tony, it's the middle of Lent. Are you busy? How's your life going?
I think we've both been going about 100 miles per hour, and I feel like the battery's getting a little low sometimes. And I feel like that's why maybe this whole prayer practice examination of contemplation comes at the exact perfect time.
I know what you mean, Tony. It has just been go, 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 especially life in the church. Lent is a crazy time for us. I know people at home are, getting ready for spring cleaning and getting ready for school ending, and life is just crazy right now. Although that's the American motto, isn't it? Crazy life. I just think of, reflecting on life, and I don't think past generations were this crazy busy. But we need something to do. We need some refocusing on how to kind of dive into the sacredness amongst our busyness.
And you talked about past generations, and that's why we're gonna dive into a prayer practice of contemplation that really has been around since about the 5th century, way back in the Desert Fathers, and people who escaped the busyness of city life to go out to the desert just to be with the sacred and with the holy. So Lent is a time of desert, and so we're going to go into the desert of our own lives to try to kind of chill it down a little bit, to have some quiet, and to spend some time in prayer. Now, sometimes we think of prayer as almost like a checkbook, like where the more prayers we get in a given day, the better off our life is. Almost as if it's the great holy checkbook or banking account in the sky kind of a thing.
If I say enough Our Fathers, my life is gonna go right. I just need to keep praying those Hail Marys and Our Fathers, right?
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. And so in contemplation, we're not looking at rote prayer like you're talking about there. This is turning within, finding the God within. I'm going to throw 2 churchy words at you really quick.
This is not our thing.
Hang with me, though.
Okay.
Sometimes we talk about the holy, the sacred God as being transcendent, as being out there, bigger than big. And God is that, right? So, because if we think we have a handle on what the sacred is, what the holy is, what God is, we're probably off course because God's bigger than all of that, right? That's transcendence out there. But God is also immanent. Another big churchy word. Immanent.
Bring it down a little for me.
God is right within us. And if we can quiet ourselves, if we can focus upon the inside of us, that's where God is dwelling as well. But it takes some quiet. It takes slowing down, sitting down, and just being quiet to discover that part of God.
Which is so countercultural of our society today, but it's needed more than ever.
Absolutely. And that's why people in past generations, especially like in farming communities and such, when the sun went down, that was the time when you could be quiet, right? Now there is no sundown.
No.
We have cities that never sleep, right? So this contemplation practice is going to help us to slow down, to quiet ourselves, and to discover the holy right within ourselves. So there's lots of different ways to do this. Katie, you want to go through just some of them?
So there's meditation walking, just getting out and just walking in nature. There's Lectio Divina, which we kind of talk about and touch upon a couple of times throughout this podcast. There's the Jesus prayer, which we will kind of highlight in a later podcast.
Yeah, the Jesus prayer is as a breathing exercise prayer in which we breathe in and say, Lord Jesus Christ. As we breathe out or exhale, we say, have mercy on me. And we'll go over that in a later podcast, I'm
absolutely.
sure.
So stay tuned. We have the loving kindness meditation. Again, we'll get to that later. We have mantras where you just repeat a word over and over again, just kind of help yourself kind of focus. And then the centering prayer, which we will focus on this podcast.
Right. So centering prayer is just really what it says. We're going to center ourselves inside of ourselves. We're going to center on our inner being, not what's going on around us. There's a priest out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His name is Father Richard Rohr, famous spiritual leader of our time, of the 21st century.
And he's actually in the desert, so this is perfect.
He kind of is, yeah, out in Albuquerque. And he's written many, many books and delivered all kinds of presentations, and he's on podcasts himself. But Father Richard and his Center for Action and Contemplation has done a lot of work on just that, contemplation. And so let's listen to a clip from Father Richard as he describes what contemplation is all about.
It's really a different form of consciousness. It's not saying prayers, it's living in constant unitive union with God and everything around you. So whatever you do is a prayer. That's why Paul can twice say in his letters, pray always. He can't mean walking around saying the Our Father all day. And the very fact that in Luke's gospel, they have to ask him, teach us a prayer, like the disciples of John the Baptist have. We can assume he hadn't taught him a verbal prayer. His form of prayer when he goes off to the desert is what we would call contemplative prayer, where you rewire this mind so that everything you do is connected in loving union with the moment, with whatever's right in front of you. That's contemplation.
So how are we going to do centering prayer? How are we going to do contemplation in terms of this podcast? What we would invite you to do, and length is important here because I think it takes a little bit of time to kind of get into contemplation. Father Richard Rohr would say the first minutes of your, what he calls a sit, when you actually just sit and close your eyes and just be. A lot of those first minutes are going to be all kinds of distractions where we're going to think of this, we're going to think of that. Don't get frustrated with that. But in terms of the length, you must have to do this in a length that makes that possible to get beyond the distractions to, in a sense, the good stuff, right? So I would recommend anywhere between 10 and 20 minutes for your first sits. Now that might, lengthen as time goes on, but for starters, it's kind of like the beginner course here. 10 minutes might be exactly what you want to do. Ultimately, it's just sitting and reflecting and not thinking about anything in particular. Just trying to quiet your mind, quiet your whole self down to not think of anything. Now, part of the problem is we think of things, right? So the minute we sit and we try to not think of something, guess what's going to happen?
That's when all the things that I forgot to do pop into my head.
Father Richard, really quoting another spiritual leader, Tom Keating, talks about the fact that picture those things that pop into your mind as little boats on a river. When they pop into your mind, oh my gosh, I got to add this to the shopping list, or I have got to get the kids over here, or
I forgot to call that person or respond to that email.
Put that on a boat and send it down the river, and just let those float on by and get back to the practice of contemplation. So sometimes that's those distractions can get frustrating for people, but if you picture it as just put them aside, let them float down the river, get back to contemplation, that can help. So what we're going to do is have you take some time to do just that.
Yeah, so sit for a few minutes, turn down the sound on this podcast, pause it, or we will be playing some music. Sometimes for me, quietness is really hard. I need something in the background. So we'll play some quiet music for contemplation.
So let's sit for some time. So we invite you to come back now from your time of contemplation, and we hope that for a beginning time of being quiet and going within, that's been fruitful for you. The more you do it, I think the better it gets, the easier it becomes, and the more a part of your prayer routine it becomes. And the beautiful thing about this is if you build this into your daily or at least regular part of what you do, you will begin to see, as Father Richard Rohr explained in that clip that we played earlier, you'll see all of life a little bit differently. Being able to reflect upon that flower that you see on your walk, being able to appreciate the child who is sitting right in front of you, being able to really view all as sacred and as beautiful.
I think of it as running a marathon. You don't put on your Nikes day one and run 30 miles. You have to build up to this. So that's why we start, like you said, 10 minutes, and eventually we'll be running the marathon.
So there's some challenges with doing contemplation, and might as well just throw those out there as you experience this. I know for myself, one of my ultimate challenges is when I sit down and I'm quiet, I close my eyes, guess what happens? I fall asleep.
You fall asleep.
Invariably, I fall asleep. For me, that's a challenge. And so I tend to need to do contemplation in a moving format, like in walking. But for others, that can be quite a beautiful time on a daily basis. For me, that's just a big challenge, is when I quiet myself almost too much.
And for me, it's, like we said before, it's the things that pop into my head. Those are my challenges. How do I kind of let the outside world stop entering my quietness? So,
and I would just say too, another challenge is this: it is countercultural, as you said before, and so we're a productive culture. We want to be busy, and we want to be doing something. We want to be producing something or making something and doing something valuable with our time. This doesn't appear on the face of it to be a valuable part of our day. Actually, it's maybe if you begin to do this, it might become the most important part of your day, the most valuable part of your day. The problem is setting aside that time. That's a challenge. Making sure you carve out some time for contemplation each day.
Yeah. I think of it as our devices. I hate to bring this up, but we are so glued to our devices and they help us be productive. Well, you know what? You need to charge up those devices. You need to plug in to that energy source, and contemplation is us plugging into that energy source so that we can become more productive in life.
That is a great metaphor for contemplation.
So just as a reminder, we find the sacredness in the ordinariness of sitting in silence. It is in silence that we can start to see things clearer. We can see the sacredness. We can look around in our ordinary lives and see God working.
So we just invite you as listeners to try to build this into your regular routine, the regular part of your life each day. If it can't be every day, maybe start once a week, twice a week. And maybe as you see the benefits of contemplation over time, maybe you can build in an extra day a week. And it's like any other, like you said, any other exercise that you do. Sometimes you got to build up to it, and both in time and maybe also in terms of frequency as well.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of Revealed, focusing on contemplation. We really hope that you take time to use this prayer practice in your daily life.
Thanks for being with us.
This has been Revealed, a podcast sponsored by Resurrection Catholic Parish in Green Bay, Wisconsin.